Hello and welcome to this online tutorial about completing the Indicators of Regulatory Policy and Governance, or iREG survey for 2020. My name is Paul Davidson and I'm currently the Acting Head of Program for the Measuring Regulatory Performance Program as part of the Regulatory Policy Division of the OECD. I'd just like to take a few minutes to go through the questionnaire with you, and I hope that this will cover off on potentially some main queries that you may have regarding the survey. And if you have any other queries subsequent to this, you should feel free to contact us through the GovReg survey email. Let me also just make you aware that there also will be a separate PowerPoint presentation which provides a summary of what I'm going through. But I thought that it would be of most use to delegates to actually illustrate this in the workbook that you have all now received with your various previous country information. And given that you will be sending us the Excel files back, I thought this was the easiest way to facilitate this discussion. So the first sheet that you will see in your file is the README sheet. This has some quite important information and provides a bit of a summary about a number of the topics that I will cover today as part of this tutorial about filling the survey in. I would strongly suggest that you and any of your colleagues who are completing the survey read this prior to attempting to complete the survey. You may also note that we have separately sent you this sheet as an attachment in the email that you received with the survey so that you can forward that to colleagues as is necessary. The second sheet is the table of contents, and you can see that that's quite extensive. There are 5 main parts to the survey. The first one relates to the content of regulatory policies, and this looks at regulatory policies, better regulation from a whole of government perspective, generally at the national level of government. The second area of the survey looks at stakeholder engagement and transparency. The third part of the survey looks at regulatory impact assessment. The fourth part of the survey looks at ex post evaluation of regulations, reviews and management of the stock of regulations. And we have introduced a new part 5, given the current global environment. We are keen to collect some information from you all regarding regulatory policy that has occurred during the COVID-19 pandemic in relation to laws in particular areas to combat the pandemic. For those of you familiar with the survey, you would recognize the first 4 areas, but please note that there have been some changes to the questionnaire, particularly in the first section in content and in the last section in ex post evaluation. Those changes relate to the conscious decision from the Secretariat not to add additional further burden to delegates completing the survey. And as a result, we will not be rerunning the 2017 Regulatory Oversight Body Survey. Instead, we have incorporated some key elements from that survey and integrated them into the iREG 2020 survey. And the second reason for some changes to the ex post section relate to the fact that the Regulatory Policy Committee in its November 2020 meeting agreed to the best practice principles on reviewing the stock of regulation. As a result of the agreement of those best practice principles, there have been some amendments to some questions in the survey from previous editions, as well as the introduction of a few new questions to make sure that those elements that have been highlighted in the best practice principles can be reflected in the questionnaire. At this point, I would like to thank the delegates and related officials from the governments of Denmark, Estonia, Italy, and the United Kingdom for piloting these new questions earlier this year. We received some valuable feedback from them, and as a result, we hope that the questionnaire, as it has now been provided to you, will have robust questions that will make sense to both you and to your particular individual country systems. I think the other takeaway from the table of contents is that you can see that the survey is very extensive. I hope that in the next few minutes, I'll be able to go through the survey and try and break it down for you so that you can better understand what it is that we actually need from you, and that will make your survey burden the minimum necessary that it needs to be. The next tab relates to the glossary. That's the series of formal definitions that apply throughout the survey. So if I move to the first substantive sheet, the content of regulatory policies, the first thing to note is that we have already pre-filled your information based on the last survey, iREG 2017. In this case, we're talking about a general question. So those answers have been pre-filled in column J for you, wherever the information existed from the last edition of the survey. So although if you scroll down, you can see that the surveys, as I said, is very extensive. The general rule, and this applies throughout the survey for all of the sheets, is that if you have an answer that has been pre-filled from 2017 and there have been no changes up to and including the 1st of January 2021, which is the survey cutoff date, then you can leave the answer here for the 2020 column, which is column M, blank, and the Secretariat will assume that your 2017 answer has been, it reflects current requirements and or practice, as the case may be, and you need to do nothing for that question. You simply need to check that the existing answer is still correct for that particular question, and you need to do nothing more for that question, and you can move straight forward to the next question. If, however, your answer to the question has changed between the end of December 2017 and the 1st of January 2021, then we invite you to change that answer. And when you change your answer, you'll see that the column next to it, which is column N for the general questions of the survey, will be highlighted in a red color, indicating that in order to substantiate your changed answer here, we need some sort of evidence and or comments to substantiate the answer. So this is a free text cell, so you can provide a written answer typed in and supplement that potentially with a web link to a public report or public document where this information can be found. We would please ask that you note the specific page number or paragraph, if it's a legal text, something like that. That way the Secretariat can validate the answer more easily, and it will save us both time in terms of the validation process. So the idea of going through this tutorial today is to try and hopefully get to a point where you can provide us with the most accurate and most complete information, so that we really only need to go through the verification round the one time, and then we can hand you the file back for finalization. So this is the general rule, and this applies throughout the survey. So you can see that applies to all of these questions. These other cells are grayed out because for general questions we only ask for one question. So if I just scroll down to section B, and explain that again. In this case here, column J relates to primary laws and column K to subordinate regulations. The same pre-filling exercise has been done for this particular question. And again, if your answer from the previous edition of the iREG 2017 still reflects your current requirement or practice, as the case may be, you can leave column M for primary laws and column W for subordinate regulations blank. And we will assume that your 2017 answer is still correct and is still current and is still reflective of your current system. Again, if there is a change that is needed, please change it in the respective cells. And the evidence field, so for primary laws, that's column N, and for subordinate regulations, that's column X, will then be highlighted to remind you that you then need to substantiate any change to that answer. So this general rule applies throughout the survey, and what I then want to do is just walk you through a couple of exceptions to this general rule. So the first of which relates to questions that require evidence to substantiate existing positive answers. So for example, section F of content, these questions that require new evidence to maintain a positive answer to ensure that we continue to track current practices. These questions are clearly denoted with an asterisk that you can see here, and that means that we would need some new evidence from you to substantiate the maintenance of a positive answer. So for example, here it's been pre-filled yes based on 2017, and then we just have a web address that was validated for the last data collection. These cells over here for column M have already been highlighted to denote to you that we need some information from you. So for those questions with an asterisk, where you have a previous positive answer, we will need a new web link or new evidence that substantiates the maintenance of that positive answer, even if nothing has changed between 2017 and 2021. The other exception to the general rule relates to questions that are new for the 2020 iREG survey. So for example, in section I, which looks at the coherence across all levels of government and consideration of existing international instruments, you'll see that there is no pre-filled answer for the iREG from last time. So column J is grayed out, as is column K, meaning that we as Secretariat do not have any data because these questions are new questions. So where the questions are new, we would ask that you provide the answer in the 2020 answer column, which if it's a general question, you just need to answer column M. If there are primary and subordinate questions, then you need to provide an answer in column M, substantiate that with evidence in column N, and answer the column in W for subordinate regulation and X to provide evidence to substantiate that answer. In order to reduce survey burden, we will not be collecting answers for these questions for any past years. So this is the majority of the case for new questions that have been introduced into the survey. We are only looking for information from this survey forwards, from 2020 onwards. Another important exception relates to a relatively small number of questions that are new that we also require an answer for 2017 from. These questions are highlighted with a red box, where ordinarily you would have your current answer from the iREG 2017 here. So for example, here in question 1C1, AVII and AVIII. So A7 and A8 here. These questions are, these cells are red for you, therefore highlighting that you need to answer these, as was the case in 2017. So for example, if we just turn one to no and one to yes, then we also would request that you look at whether or not those answers have changed between the 31st of December 2017 and the 1st of January 2021. That is the scope of the survey for the current iREG. So for example, if this particular question was no last time up to 2017, but now there is a policy in place, we change the answer to yes, and then you would need to substantiate that positive answer. If you had answered yes in 2017 and the policy was unchanged, please leave the cell blank. Again, this is just to reduce the survey burden on you, so you don't need to make any updates to that answer if what was introduced in 2017 still reflects your current practice. Another important exception to the general rule: for a very, very limited number of questions, we require an answer for 2014, 2017, and for 2020. These are new questions that have not been asked before, and these are important to maintain a complete time series for us as the Secretariat as part of monitoring the recommendation. But these are for very few questions, and these are clearly signposted. So what the Secretariat has done, for example, this question here, 1H2, are there ongoing mechanisms by which the public can dispute the legality of an existing regulation? Selecting those that apply. We have a cell here that you can click on, which will take you to a separate sheet where you can provide your answers for 2014 and for 2017. So if you simply click on that, you will then be taken to an additional sheet. You can see that you have moved to the sheet down here, and that will now give you an opportunity where you can now provide an answer for 2014 for that question. And if the answer is positive, please fill in the evidence column. And if the answer is negative, then you don't need to do anything with the evidence column. We would then ask for you to indicate whether anything has changed between 2014 and 2017. If nothing has changed, you can leave these cells blank, and we will assume that your 2014 answers are still current for 2017. You can then click here to return to the survey. That will take you back to the main questionnaire, and you're back to question 1H2 in the section. Then we ask finally that you provide an answer for 2020 for those respective questions, as per usual, in column M and or in column W, depending on whether the question relates to primary laws and subordinate regulations or whether it's just a general question. If your answer from 2014 and or from 2017 is still current in 2020, you do not need to answer. You do not need to provide an answer for these cells. And we will take your latest data, be it from 14 or from 17, as the current answer, as long as nothing has changed. Again, this is to reduce burden on you, so you do not need to keep answering the survey unnecessarily. We'll just take the answers that you have provided for those earlier years, as long as nothing has changed in your system relating to the requirement or practice of that particular question. The last point I would like to note with regards to the survey is that the Secretariat has, you'll notice that there's a series of red text information in here. What we have done is integrated the glossary document into the survey itself. So if you hover your mouse over the cell, you'll see that for particular things that we have explained either as a glossary formal term or as some sort of clarification to assist you in understanding the question so you can provide the most accurate information. There's then additional information provided in the comment box. So for example, that could be in this case, a web link, or it may be some sort of a definition, just to assist you in completing the survey. So these are the main points that I wanted to go through with regards to the main body sheets, which are the sheets relating to content of regulatory policy, the sheet on stakeholder engagement and transparency, the sheet on regulatory impact assessment, and the sheet on ex post evaluation. The subsidiary sheets to each of these areas are color-coded. So for example, you can see that there are 4 additional sheets: policy documents, IRC policy documents, oversight bodies, and competences that are subordinate to the content of regulatory policy section of the survey. And in a similar way to the 2014 and 2017 questions, you will have linked boxes where you can provide information to that. So for example here, question 1A1, is there an explicit published regulatory policy promoting government-wide regulatory reform or regulatory quality improvement? And if yes, you can click here to access the table, and that takes you to the policy document sheet, where again, we have pre-filled your answers from iREG 2017. If those answers are correct and remain current, then you do not need to do any changes in column H here or column I, and you can leave them blank, and we will assume that your 2017 answers are still current and correct. And again, there is a link to return back to the survey. And that's the case for all of those subordinate sheets. The last sheet I wanted to spend a moment on related to the COVID sheet. This sheet was not previously asked as part of previous data collection, and obviously given the current global environment, the Secretariat is quite keen to understand what regulatory policies have been carried out by countries during the COVID pandemic. And you can see here that there's a table of contents for this particular sheet that relates to the main areas of regulatory policy. So there's one on stakeholder engagement, one on regulatory impact assessment, one on ex post evaluation, one section on risk regulation, a section on IRC, a section on oversight, and a section, and G is a general section just relating to regulatory management during the pandemic. And these questions are set out as much as possible for you in a yes-no format, again, to reduce survey burden on you wherever possible. You'll note that for some of the questions, we have a link back to the main area of the survey. So for example, this question relates to, is there a formal requirement for a minimum period for consultations with the public, including citizens, business, and civil society organizations? That's question 2A3 in the survey. It means that it comes from section A of the stakeholder engagement and transparency part of the survey. And your answer here for primary laws and for subordinate regulations will be pre-filled based on the answer that you provide in that particular sheet. So if there has been a change relating to minimum periods, this change will be automatically reflected in these 2 cells. If you have had no change, then these will be reflective automatically of your answers from 2017. As you work your way down through the sheet, through the various sections, I'd just like to draw your attention quickly to the last one, which is on section H on regulatory management. We have selected 6 broad areas. These relate to the areas, to some of the key areas that are currently covered by the OECD policy tracker. And we hope that this will help to reduce survey burden for you as delegates whilst completing this survey, and at the same time help us as the Secretariat to provide cross-country comparable information as much as possible. So there are there are 5 headings of particular activities that we're looking at relating to confinement, lockdown, travel bans, travel restrictions, public events, economic activities, fiscal measures, and health system measures. And the 6th section is an option for you to provide any additional ones that you consider that would be of relevance to the Secretariat. They follow the same format, each area. And again, for example, you can note the red text where we have hopefully assisted you by providing some formal definitions about things as they relate to the survey. And as I said previously, wherever possible, we've tried to make these as much as possible as yes/no questions. So with that, there's nothing further from me. As I said previously, we will have a PowerPoint that relates to this particular tutorial. It has some screenshots of the various things that I have walked you through today. And I hope that both this and the PowerPoint will hold you in good stead for completing the survey. And we look forward to receiving your surveys, which are due on the 18th of September. If you have any further queries or questions regarding the survey, please feel free to contact us at govregsurvey@oecd.org, or alternately, you can contact me personally, paul.davidson@oecd.org, and we'll be happy to address any particular concerns or queries that you have in completing the survey. Thank you.